Hello, everyone. Cecil Martin here.
Hey, this is Hunter Henry.
What's up, man? This is Max Crosby, part of Raider Nation.
Hey, this is Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman.
Hey, it's Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks.
Hey, this is Jerry Judah, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and you're listening to the Full10Yards NFL podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Full10Yards NFL podcast. I'm your host Sam Moores and this is our penultimate recap of the season. It's week 17, we've just had it. And there's only one place to start, isn't there really? And it's Lamar Jackson who sealed MVP with a perfect performance as the Ravens also secured the 1 seed in a big victory over the Miami Dolphins. He went 18 of 21, completing over 80% of his passes for 321 yards and 5 touchdowns in the air, and had a further 35 yards on the ground. Perfect pass rating as well, obviously 5 touchdowns helped to that. And he was the highest graded QB this week by PFF by quite some margin too, and it's one of the highest grades you'll ever see. For me, Baltimore after this, obviously the team by far to beat in the AFC. They were excellent on every phase. Every other team, then maybe Buffalo have something wrong with them. Even Buffalo have looked like they have something wrong with them at points this year as well. So for me, but like Baltimore just look absolutely like amazing. And again, I think they are. I'm right now. If I was to pick a Super Bowl matchup, it would be Ravens Niners, and obviously the Niners getting a little bit of a revenge and not turning the ball over 5 times. I think it'd be a fascinating football game because there's two San Francisco style offenses the Ravens have matched up pretty well against the last 2 games. So it'll be interesting to see how, if they were to rematch in the Super Bowl, how that would change. We actually looked to have a shootout on our hands in the first quarter because it's back and forth right at the start, but a Tyreek Hill drop in the end zone completely changed the momentum and outlook on this game. It would have given the Dolphins a 7-point lead. They were in the lead for a lot of the first quarter. I think they would have put them up 14-0. They went for a field goal instead. 2 punts later, and then Lamar Jackson hit Odell Beckham Jr. on a deep shot. He caught the ball within the 5, and then Gus Edwards run it in for a touchdown. And then Baltimore had the lead from then on out. It was actually a 1-point game with 3 minutes before the half, but a 75-yard touchdown to Zay Flowers, followed by a one-handed Roquan Smith interception as Miami rushed a play trying to get in ahead, basically trying to catch Ravens out before the 2-minute warning. It backfired on them because 2 or 3 interceptions of Roquan Smith and also one-handed grab. And the Ravens got the ball back again to make it a 2-score game. They were in long field goal territory, so it looks like they're probably going to go for a field goal and give Miami the ball back. But John Harbaugh, of his special teams coach, opted to go for it on 4th and 7 instead of going for a long field goal with Justin Tucker. Well, Lamar Jackson caught Miami's defense off guard deep again, with Isaiah Likely this time diving in for a 35-yard touchdown. And that was it. It was a 3-score game at half time. Justice Hill returned the second half kickoff for basically like 90 yards before Isaiah Likely caught his second touchdown of the game on the very first drive within seconds of the second half kickoff. And the Ravens were at 4 scores and they went on to win 56-19. Before I get into Ravens some more, I just want to talk about how much of a detrimental loss this is to the Dolphins because it's huge. Had they beaten Tennessee and the Jets in week 14 and 15, they would have sealed the AFC East before this 3-game stretch against the Cowboys, Ravens, and then they've got the Bills next week. But due to Buffalo winning their last 4 straight and obviously Miami losing that game against Tennessee, the division now goes down to when they meet in Miami in a season closer on Sunday Night Football this week. Not only did they get outclassed and outcoached, they also suffered some really horrific injuries which may derail the Dolphins season even further. Unfortunately, they were already without Jalen Waddle and Raheem Mostert on this one, on top of other injuries like Robert Hunt and Jerome Baker in this game, 2 very key starters. They then lost Xavier Howard to a foot injury in the first quarter, and then Bradley Chubb went down with a non-contact knee injury, and Tua exited with a shoulder issue in the fourth quarter as well. And while Tua Tagovailoa is good to go and make it through his first ever full season, Bradley Chubb tore his ACL, unfortunately, the second of his career. He's now done both knees as well, which is quite concerning. And he's done for the year, obviously. And then Xavier Howard is week to week, and he's set to miss Sunday Night Football against the Bills as well. And that is 3 of the Dolphins' best players that got hurt in this game. Luckily, Tua is good to go, but he's still banged up, at the worst time. And unfortunately for Miami, losing Bradley Chubb, you've already lost Jalen Phillips as well. And Angelo Van Ginkel and Melvin Ingram and Emmanuel Ogbah are good situational pass rushers, but those guys as starters is a completely different prospect the Dolphins have got to deal with now, because you've lost your 2 game wreckers in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, both to non-contact injuries late in games as well. So Mike McDaniel, unfortunately for him, he's going to take a lot of flack for that, because Phillips had no right being in that game 3 minutes to go against the Jets, or however long it was, and obviously Bradley Chubb had 3 minutes to go against this game. When the Dolphins are getting absolutely blown out by the Ravens, there's no reason why Bradley Chubb should have been in, playing football at that point with a few minutes left to go. Unfortunately, McDaniel's going to take a lot of flack for that. But as the Dolphins Super Bowl window closes, they've probably got one more year left. This is really unfortunate news for them. Just a really terrible day at the office, to be honest with you. On the flip side, an absolutely huge statement for Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. I said last week I wasn't ready to crown him MVP just yet, because he didn't take over that San Francisco game. He just finished it off with what the defense gave him. Obviously, five turnovers, from right at the start, 4 interceptions, and they got a turnover at the end of the game as well. That's how he win a football game, not by one of Lamar's touchdowns against San Francisco was short field, but in this one he had one of the best QB performances of the season. Maybe Tua in week 1 against the Chargers is up there. Purdy's had another one as well that's been similar, but I think it may be the best QB performance of the season. And it was in a big spot, and that's why he's the MVP, because he has come up big the last 2 games now and won his team not only the 1 seed, two games against teams that have 10 plus wins. Miami had 11, San Francisco had 11 when they played him as well. And he just come up really big when needed, and that's why Lamar Jackson is MVP of football. And also as well, the Ravens completely outcoached Dolphins in this game. And that's why the Ravens assistants are going to get some head coaching interviews too. They've done an excellent job. Mike McDonald has an awesome defense all year, and it's a really big turnaround as well from the time when these teams last met in week 2 last year, where the Dolphins, they scored 21 points in the fourth quarter. I think 2 or 3 6 touchdowns in that game to come back and win. They just completely capitulated. I think they had like 600 yards of offense or something stupid in that game as well. Now, basically 30 games later, it's interesting to see where that Ravens defense is at now. And fair play to McDonald. Obviously, he was DC back then. The turnaround to now have the number 1 defense and sacks per game, takeaways per game, obviously points per game as well. That's 3 huge factors on defense. They lead the league in every single one of them. They're just brilliant. And for me, I think they're going to the Super Bowl. I can't put it any less than that. I think they're going to the Super Bowl from what we've seen right now, and Lamar is MVP. For Miami, well, that's just it's just an unfortunate day at the office, really. And I think for them, obviously Baltimore, they're probably best starters against Pittsburgh. As for Miami, they've got a very, very big game next week, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we'll go over to the NFC now, where the 11-win Philadelphia Eagles were stunned by Arizona in Jonathan Gannon's return to Philadelphia. It gave the Cardinals their 4th win of the season. James Conner's touchdown gave Arizona the lead with 32 seconds left before Joey Blunt intercepted a Hurts Hail Mary to seal the game for Arizona. This now means that the Dallas Cowboys reclaim the lead of the NFC East after their win over the Lions on Saturday against the Lions at home. And even though that was a controversial win as well, the Lions probably should have won that game, but the Cowboys came away with it, and now they are leaders of the NFC East. So what a weekend for a Dallas Cowboys fan. I saw this one coming on Friday. I didn't think they'd lose this one, the Eagles, but I knew it would be close. I said I didn't trust the Eagles, especially if they don't get out to a big early lead. Now, Arizona controlled the clock for this one completely throughout, and if it wasn't for a top Jalen Hurts showing, he was actually really good in this game. The Eagles may have lost this one quite heavily because they were just completely run over. They only had 20 minutes of the ball. In that time, Hurts threw 3 touchdowns and was PFF's 2nd best QB in the day, the 3rd best passer of the day as well. Arizona had 221 yards on the ground. The Eagles had 275 yards in total. They were absolutely abysmal in the second half again, especially on defense. It hasn't changed since Matt Patricia's been calling plays. They just they got all the personnel to be great on defense. Maybe in the back end, not so much like safety or something. Safety and linebacker were the two spots where they lost most players this year, and they are getting torched at the middle of the field. So that maybe there's something you can take away there. But yeah, going from a top 5 defense to a bottom 5 defense in one season, is quite some turnaround. In the opposite direction. And they were only up 2 scores in this one anyway, because Kyler Murray threw a pick 6 to Sidney Brown at the start of the game anyway. They were never in control. The Eagles just got 7 points from that, and the Cardinals were in control of this game for a lot of it. They may not have been that way on the scoreline, but they were certainly in control, and the Eagles had no answer for it. The defense allowed 29 points in the final 2 quarters from the Cardinals. Their offense scored 10 points, and the lead just wasn't big enough again. It's the same old story. Same with the Jets game. Same with a lot of other games. The Seahawks game as well. If the Eagles aren't dominant right at the start, they're the worst, or probably one of the worst teams in the second half in the entire league, and they're going to be in the playoffs with 11 wins. It's just such a weird story. With the loss, they've now only got a 17% chance at the division as well. And it does sound like Devontae Smith may miss a bit of time to obviously star wide receiver. He left the stadium on crutches and had a boot on his right leg as well. Unfortunately for him, it is an ankle injury. The Eagles have now lost 4 of the last 5 heading into the postseason. And to New York, who they only just beat on Christmas Day. Obviously came down to the last play of the game. And it's in New York as well. And I think the Giants will probably be wanting to really hurt Philly even more. The Cardinals have been well coached all season, and they've now beaten both the Cowboys and the Eagles. I just can't wait to see the start of a better roster. And shout out to Kyler Murray too as well. After that pick 6, he was absolutely awesome in this one as well. One of the best games I've seen Kyler have in his NFL career. So he was absolutely excellent. And again, for the Cardinals, it just puts up an interesting question now. What are they going to do with him? Now, winning this game means they've also got they've got the 4th overall pick now, maybe even 5th. So getting Caleb Williams is considerably more difficult now, and it's just whether at this stage I'd probably say get Kyler some help and keep him, because he's with the likes of Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch as his receivers, he's playing pretty good football. In the trenches this team isn't bad. They probably need some more help in the trenches. They're sort of tore down the roster in the right way. Their skill position players are horrific, and that's where they need to really look at this offseason. But they've got loads of cap room. They've got obviously a very high draft pick as well. I personally would keep Kyler Murray. He's obviously he's got that contract as well, and now that contract's looking relatively cheap as well compared to some of the other deals that some of the other quarterbacks are getting as well. So I think it's smart to keep Kyler, build around him, because this coaching staff looks very good. You just got to keep hold of your offensive coaching staff too. That's the problem, because unfortunately the way that their offense has looked with the talent they've had, they might be in demand in a year or two, unfortunately. I mean, they may get another win next week, going against Seattle. We never know. Obviously, it wouldn't be funny if they ruined Seattle's playoff hopes as well. After really hurting the Eagles this week. Right, we'll go over to the AFC again and to Kansas City, who wrapped up their 8th straight AFC West title. This is called the playoff spot of the win as well, obviously winning the AFC West, and they beat the Bengals in this game 25-17, and it prevented the Bengals from their 3rd straight regular season game win at Arrowhead. So obviously it's been the whole Burrowhead thing. It was a Browning head in this game, unfortunately, with Jake, but he was good. I thought Jake Browning was pretty good, but the Chiefs were really good in the second half, which is good for them going into the playoffs. They were down 17-13 at half time, but their defense completely shut out the Bengals in the second half, completing a comeback victory that eliminated the Bengals from playoff position 2. The game changed after Willie Gay stuffed Joe Mixon on 4th and 1 inside the 10, midway through the 3rd quarter, and the Chiefs just went on and went to go and win the game after that. Had Mixon scored a touchdown on that drive, it would have been a different story. They went down and got within 1 through a Butker field goal. Then they had a vintage Mahomes drive that ended the 3rd quarter. Unfortunately for them, they started the 4th quarter with a field goal on that drive because the Bengals were great in the red zone in this game. But the Chiefs were moving the football down the field, and that's great for them because they've struggled to do that recently. They were stopped in the red zone by the Bengals again, but they got a field goal. 2 more Harrison Butker field goals and a Chiefs defensive stand finish this one off, with Isaiah Pacheco's first half touchdown being the only trip to the end zone in this one. But the Chiefs were much better offensively in this one, as I said, which I'm sure they'll take into the playoffs. Having Pacheco back was a huge factor. He had 165 total yards, 130 rushing, 7.2 yards per carry, and 1 receiving touchdown as well. As for their defense, they were great as well. Much was made about Lamar Chase in the build-up. He thought he'd go off against a defense that doesn't have a top takeaway corner, but they've got some great zone corners and they've got some great corners who are great, but basically in Spag's defense, which is one of the most difficult schemes to play in the NFL. L'Jarius Sneed had a great game in this one as well, and there's a lot to talk about him going up against Jamar Chase. And Jamar, he led the Bengals in receiving, but he got 3 targets for 42 yards, which just shows how the Bengals were shut out in the second half in this one. The Chiefs were just to finish on them. They still weren't back to their usual level, I could say, but I don't think they ever will be this year. They're not the same team, not the same talent, and I think last year they sort of rode their wave, and they had some quite good, reliable slot receivers. This year they've not had any reliable slot receivers, and that's been an issue for them. I think Rashee Rice has been great, but he's been the only reliable target. And people like MVS have taken a step backwards this year, and they've just been played. And obviously Travis Kelce taking a step back as well is a huge disappointment for them as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the off season. But I don't think they'll be back to where they were a couple of years ago. But I can see them winning a playoff game. I can see them going up against the Dolphins or the Bills and beating them. Especially if it's at Arrowhead, but I can't see them beating Baltimore, unfortunately. And if they have to go to Buffalo, I think they'll lose that game as well. But I can still see them winning the playoff game, for sure, absolutely. We'll go on to the next game now between the Steelers and the Seahawks, where Mike Tomlin's streak of never having a losing season continues as the Pittsburgh Steelers outdueled the Seattle Seahawks, hurting Seattle's playoff chances as well. With this win, the Steelers stay alive in the AFC wildcard race, but rank last of the 9-7 teams. So have to beat Baltimore next Saturday to get into the postseason. They'll be hoping that Baltimore rest their starters, but as it's a division game, you never know. So that is an interesting scenario. It's the game that's on Saturday night. It's the first one on Saturday as well. So it'll be obviously both of the Saturday games and national audiences, but I think this one may have more views, even though the Texans-Colts game is more important. The Steelers were absolutely tremendous in offense, especially at running the football. Like it's weird saying that, bear in mind how bad they've been in offense this year. But and especially with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, but they were great in this one, and I think it probably shows where Seattle's defense is at this year as well, which, it's just not been good. It's totally regressed from last year, and they've got more talent than they did last year as well. So, the Seahawks defense is a bit of a concern for me. They got 202 yards between their great running back tandem. Najee Harris had 2 touchdowns on the day. Jalen Warren had 1 touchdown on the day. Both of them had, a great impact in this game, and it was actually a fun game to watch, which surprised me because on the podcast with Tim on Friday, we were expecting this one to be a low scoring slog that one of the teams just pips the other two in true Pete Carroll and Mike Tomlin fashion. Instead, we got a bit of a shootout, which is quite fun. The Steelers had the 10-point lead with 4 minutes to go, leaving the Seahawks with a 2-score deficit to match in that time. So it looked like the Steelers were going to win. The Seahawks did have 2 drives. The Seahawks on their next drive could only manage a field goal, which left 2 minutes on the clock. And with that time, the Steelers ran down the clock, and the Seahawks never got the ball back again. So that's how the Steelers managed to close this one out. Fair play to Mason Rudolph. He actually looked pretty decent as well. He had 274 yards and 2 big-time throws on his way to being the 5th best QB this week, according to PFF. I didn't think I'd say that at the start of the day. He impressed Mike Tomlin so much as well to name him the starter in Baltimore next week, even though Kenny Pickett is recovering from his ankle injury. So that's an interesting story. And then just one final thought with Seattle. With the loss, Seattle's playoff chances took a big fall in this one. They're now 8-8, and their chances of getting into the playoffs has gone from 68% at the start of the day to 21%. They're back on the outside looking in as well, and they head to Arizona next week, who are a difficult team to beat at home too. they have to win, and unfortunately for them, they have to hope that other results go their way as well. So yeah, it's not looking great for Seattle, a team that, going into this week looked pretty good at getting into the playoffs. Yeah, only 21% now, so they're one of the losers of the day. Right, we'll stay in the NFC West. We'll go over to the Rams, who at 9-7 did clinch a playoff berth after a little bit of heartbreak from the New York Giants. A last gasp Mason Crosby field goal was missed, resulting in a Rams win, and obviously with Seattle losing as well in the later window, it clinched that playoff spot as well. As I predicted on Friday, the Giants' defense would make this one tricky for the Rams, who led from pretty much start to finish, but never really had a foothold in this game. They turned the ball over a few times when they had the chance to extend the lead, so they just, they kept the Giants, with them throughout this game. And fair play to the Giants as well. Their offense looked way better than I thought it would, with Tyler Taylor at QB. He had a lovely throw to Darius Slayton in this game. He had another one deep downfield as well. And they got a chance to win the game after two. Lucas Havrisik missed extra points, made it a 1 point game. Obviously it would be a 3 point game, and it would be Mason Crosby field goal would be to tie the game otherwise. So unfortunately for the for the Rams, kicking issues kind of almost cost them. The Giants were down 7 with 4 minutes left. And this is why it almost cost them, because Gunnar Olszewski returned a punt for 94 yards and a touchdown, which obviously got them within one, scoring 6 points. But instead of tying the game, the Giants wanted to go for 2 to try and take the lead. Unfortunately, that kind of backfired with Tyler Taylor not being able to quite thread the football into Saquon Barkley. Saquon couldn't catch, couldn't really get it in his hands, and it was incomplete, meaning that the Rams had the lead and the ball back as well. The Giants' defense did make a stand. Isaiah Simmons sacked Stafford on third down, giving the Giants the ball back with just over a minute left. And a Tyler Taylor scramble set them up in field goal range for Mason Crosby, who obviously has made so many big kicks for the Packers, a few years ago, and then more recently the Packers, he did miss some kicks as well, which is why he found himself in the Rams practice squad a couple of weeks ago. He missed from 54 yards, so he did help out his kind of former team, the Rams, and that gave the Rams the win. It could have been a very different story had Mason Crosby made that field goal. Fair play to Tyler Taylor again, getting him into field goal range. With so little time there. Since that Crosby missed as well, the Rams kicker Lucas Havrisik has actually been cut too, meaning that the Rams are looking for a new kicker for next week in the playoffs as well. Be interesting to see who they go and get in that time. Those are kickers like on the market. Obviously, a few injured and stuff as well. So we'll see who gets that job next week and in the playoffs. And for the Giants, it's pretty good that we lost this game, to be honest with you, because they've got a better draft position now. They're currently set to have the 5th overall pick. So they're in sort of QB or top receiver, top defensive player territory, certainly. And that's the thing really. It's just, do you move on, if you have a top 5 pick, do you move on from Daniel Jones? That's the thing really. So they're going to be a very interesting team to watch at the quarterback position, and throughout this season, because obviously they were a playoff team a year ago, but they've now unfortunately got a top 5 pick. They've been plagued with injuries this year, unfortunately for them. It's pretty good they lost this game for draft position, but what they do with that draft pick, I don't know. As for the Rams, they are locked into the 6th seed, meaning that a potential return to Detroit for Matthew Stafford is pretty likely. They play the Rams in a meaningless game next week. I wonder if they'll rest the starters, because I think that the Niners are going to rest some starters in that game too, especially Christian McCaffrey. The fair play to the Rams. They're in the playoffs. It's good for them to get it locked up and done early before they play the Niners next week. That's a fair play to Sean McVay as well. For me, again, he's a candidate for Coach of the Year. I think it'll be Kevin Stefanski of how good the Browns will look this year, but I think McVay will be close second for me, certainly. It's not even a question there. Will remain in the NFC and the NFC wildcard race now, where the Green Bay Packers beat the Minnesota Vikings 33-10, and Jordan Love was just absolutely excellent in this one, helping the Packers move back into the wildcard places and practically eliminate the Vikings. Jordan Love completed 72.7% of his passes for 256 yards and 3 touchdowns against a defense that is known to confuse quarterbacks. Brian Flores' scheme and has played well above its talent this year as well. He was PFF's third best QB, the second best passer, so he just leapfrogged Jalen Hurts on the passing grade. And he was much better in this game than in the reverse fixture, showing that he really is learning defenses as he goes on. And for me, like, Love the second half of the year has really impressed me. So that's a great thing for Green Bay going into future years. I've seen a few stats. If you compare his sort of rookie year with Aaron Rodgers' rookie year, if you compare them side by side, obviously neither of them was actually their rookie year, but because it's their first year as a starter, it counts as their kind of rookie year. Their first year as a starter was absolutely identical, pretty much. So that maybe that's a good omen for the Packers. You never know. As for the Vikings, they had absolutely nothing going with rookie QB Jaron Hall, who got the start in this one. Obviously, their 5th QB change of the year. They were down multiple scores in the first half, so they benched him for Nick Mullins, who played the second half. And they did play better, to be fair to them, but the Packers were just way too far out in front in this one on Sunday Night Football, and they put together a pretty comprehensive victory. Aaron Jones was a problem again for them, which is a nice problem to have. He had 120 yards on the ground, 6 yards per carry after a strong week in Carolina last week, and it's a good sign for them if they do make the playoffs as well, that they can run the football, because they have struggled to run the football a lot this year. So that's a very good sign for them. Shout out to Bo Melton too, who caught 6 balls for 105 yards and a touchdown, stepping in for an injured Christian Watson. Obviously, before today, I don't think many people would have heard of Bo Melton, so he obviously getting 100 yards on a nationally televised game is a pretty good way to put your name out there. And obviously Jaden Reed, the star receiver, had another 89 yards and 2 TDs on the day. He also did get shaken up as well. He left the game with an injury, so it'll be interesting to see where his availability is at going into the big game next week for them. But yeah, no, the Packers are really trending up for them. And obviously their defense, I said their defense needs a game. Their defense did have a game in this one. Normally they sort of struggle against bad quarterbacks. It's a weird thing for them, but yeah, they really did put out a statement in this one, which is just tremendous for the Packers. And obviously after the Seahawks lost to the Steelers and this win, the Packers now have a 68% chance of making the postseason. They host the Bears next week. Obviously that's going to be a tough game. With how they're playing at the minute as well, I'm not sure how that goes. I think the Bears and Fields have been one of the best teams in football. Certainly one of the most difficult teams in football to beat the last month and a half. So it'll be interesting to see how that game goes. But they are right now in the playoffs as we speak. So yeah, all they've got to do is just win it in. They control their own destiny, and fair play to the Packers, because obviously at the start of the year they only had a few wins and they weren't looking great at all. So a nice little turnaround, and they're peaking at the right time, and they've got the run game pretty much nailed on now the last 2 weeks, which is excellent for them, because obviously they have 2 great running backs. So if they can get them going, that is huge news. Right, we'll flip over to the AFC now with the all AFC East game between the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. The Bills won this one. They won their 4th straight game, 27-21, and they got revenge on the Patriots as well, because the Patriots beat them in Week 7. And that sets up a AFC East title showdown on Sunday Night Football. The winner wins the AFC East, might get in as a 2 seed as well. Actually, if Miami win, they get in as a 2 seed. If Buffalo win and the Browns lose, they get in as a 2 seed as well. So if not, it'd be 3 seed for Buffalo, which would be interesting as well, because they will play Miami as a 6 seed in the playoffs. So a very, very interesting scenario this game, and it's why it's been left to the last game on Sunday Night Football. The last game, season closer, because it's just such a fascinating scenario, because again, if the Dolphins had beaten Tennessee, we wouldn't have any of this. The Dolphins would have wrapped up the playoffs weeks ago. They would have wrapped up the division weeks ago as well. They could have wrapped up the division in week 15. We're now in week 18, and they could lose the division. That's just how good Buffalo have been lately. Switching the form guide completely in the other direction, and they are now at 10-6 and within a shot of and they are now the favourites to win the AFC East, which is just absolutely remarkable, isn't it? It did look like it would be an uphill struggle for them from the very start, because the game started with a Jalen Reagor 98-yard return touchdown for the Patriots. But which would, I mean, Jalen Reagor making any 98-yard play is remarkable. Bear in mind, obviously, he was a guy that was drafted before Justin Jefferson, and he's ended up on about 6 teams since, including the Vikings with Justin Jefferson. So, him making a play as a returner was very interesting, indeed. But obviously, he put New England up 7 points, but unfortunately for them, they turned the ball over 3 times in the first half. And the Bills were quickly in front after that, but taking advantage of Bailey Zappi's 4 turnovers in the first half, 3 Zappi interceptions. They took advantage of that, but could only score off a few of them. So the Patriots did hang in there. Bailey Zappi actually rushed in to make it a 1-score game in the second quarter. It remained a 10-point or so game throughout, but obviously. And it was a close. If you look at the box score, it was a close game. But obviously, those turnovers unfortunately did hurt the Patriots in the first half. The Bills were just too good for the Patriots after that as well. They just sort of managed their way to a 27-21 win, mainly through their defense, who were really good in this game, leaving them with a 95% chance of a playoff spot, and they could be the 2 seed. Obviously, if they lose and the Steelers and Jaguars win, the Bills are actually out of the playoffs, which is just mental in the first place, because they could be the 2 seed, they could be out of the playoffs, which is just it's madness. They've really come together as a team since the controversy surrounding Sean McDermott, the coach, obviously. A weird situation with that. Obviously, I don't really agree with what he said, but he was facing a ton of pressure before that, and actually since that talk from 2019 has come out, they've actually seemed to start winning. Obviously, the pressure's gone away as well, and they've looked like a really good football team since then. So they've really come together as a team since then, which is a bit of a weird situation. And as I said, they're now the favourites for the game in Miami next week too. Obviously, it being at night time helps them as well, because it takes away the Miami Heat. They're not going to be in on the opposing sideline with the sun beaming down on them, when the Dolphins will be in the shade. It's going to be at night, so sort of neutralizes the home field advantage there. So for Buffalo, they're obviously it being national spotlight prime time, that's a lot of the time where the Dolphins struggle. So it's they're now the favourites for that game, and judging by Vic Fangio's record defending Josh Allen in previous years and earlier in the year, I'd probably back them to win this game as well, if I'm being honest. As with the Patriots, with this loss and the Cardinals win, they now go back to number 3 in the draft order, which is excellent for them. Looks like they're probably going to get a new quarterback next year, and I'm interested to see who they go for as a head coach. Obviously, it looks like Belichick's going to be moving on, and that's mad as well. Next year will be Bill Belichick's last game as Patriots head coach, unless something drastically changes. I just assume that feels so weird to say, doesn't it? But yeah, the Patriots really, they're lose next week, and their rebuild can really start, because they're going to have a high draft pick, they're going to have a load of cap room as well, and they're probably going to have a new coach. And when they've got 3 teams that'll be pushing for the Super Bowl next year in the AFC East, obviously with the Jets coming back with Aaron Rodgers, the Dolphins still having a ton of talent on their roster, and the Bills, pretty much having the same as the Dolphins, they'll be back next year, no doubt. You have 3 teams pushing for the Super Bowl, and then you have the Patriots as a sort of frisky team trying to rebuild as well. So for them, it's probably the perfect time to rebuild, actually. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise that Belichick's go. I don't know, but time for them to start fresh. Right, we'll go over. We'll now talk about 2 of the tastiest division races, as obviously the AFC East going into the rest of the season. We'll start with the NFC South, and we'll start with the Saints-Bucks game, because the Saints got the job done in Tampa Bay, keeping them in the playoff hunt and setting up a fun finish to the NFC South next week. Now, both of these teams are now 8-8. They're both 3-2 in Division 2, but the Bucks have a tiebreaker over the Saints, and they play Carolina next week, so they're still the favourite for the division. But if New Orleans beat the Falcons next week on the early window, the game of the early window, I'd say, if the Saints can beat the Falcons next week, they can still get in as a wildcard team. And obviously, if they beat the Falcons and the Bucks lose to the Panthers, then the Saints will win the division. Fair play to the Saints for getting it done, staying in the playoff hunt. Obviously, making a Tampa team that had won 4 in a row going into this one, one of the best teams in football, form-wise anyway. Going into this one, their defense, which has been good all year, really took over in this one. They were the star of the show. They they limited the Tampa Bay offense that's been very, very successful this year. At the very start, the box score may not allude to that, but they shut them out in the first half. They had 13 points all day, and a lot of their yardage is from garbage time. So the Saints defense were just brilliant in this one. They forced 4 turnovers. They forced the Bucs to convert just 2 of their third downs all game, and they stopped them from reaching the red zone all game as well. So fair play to the Saints defense. They were absolutely phenomenal. Their offense, which again I've been highly critical of because they have all the talent in the world, but they just can't score points. They got points early on the board too, which they've struggled with a lot this year. They've scored points later on, but they've not really scored points early. And they're really starting to get Juwan Johnson involved now, tight end obviously for them. He was talked about a lot preseason. Everyone was saying draft him in fantasy. He never really got any targets, but the last couple of weeks he's got really involved. He had 90 yards on the day. But unfortunately for the Saints, they did lose Alvin Kamara midway through this one to an ankle sprain. As of right now, the severity of that ankle sprain, whether it's a high ankle, whether it's a mild one, it's not been reported yet. So that may be a good thing for them. But whether he plays next week is yet to be seen. And as for Tampa Bay, obviously Baker Mayfield, he took a really hard hit from Tyrann Mathieu late in the fourth quarter. There's not been too much about that. Hopefully he's okay. Obviously if the Bucs can't go with Baker next week, then it might be very difficult for them against Carolina, who again have started to look better offensively recently. So that's that is an interesting scenario. We'll see. We'll update you on that on Friday with the Week 18 preview. But fair play. Saints got it done. The Bucs still in the lead of the NFC South, but it's going to be more difficult for them now from now on, going into Week 18. And as for the other team, because there is one team still alive in the NFC South, it is the Atlanta Falcons, who got absolutely dominated by the Bears and Justin Fields in the snow. They just kept piling the snow on top of the Falcons' playoff hopes. But because the Bucs lost, the Falcons are still alive in the division race. This was actually such a fun game to watch. They look great with the heavy snow falling throughout too. It just looked awesome. Like just because it wasn't sticking on the field, but you can tell the snow was just falling and being swept to the side by the wind. And it must have been horrific for the fans, just getting snow in their face all the time, just getting hit by the wind as well. But it was the DJ Moore and Justin Fields show for Chicago. They connected 9 times for 159 yards and scored the opening TD of the game too. Fields had 268 yards in total in the air and 45 rushing yards, including a touchdown in the red zone too. And the Bears scored 2 touchdowns early before the Falcons actually responded with a Tyler Algier 75-yard screen pass that was taken to the house. But from then, the Bears just shoveled 10 more points onto the box score outside of half-time. That put the Falcons behind 3 scores, and it just was a deficit they just couldn't recover from. But as I said, they can still make the playoffs via the division title. They're out of the wildcard race now. They've got too many losses. They've got 9 losses. But they can win a division at 8-9. If they beat the Saints will be 8-9. If they beat the if they beat the if the Bucs lose to the Panthers, then they'll be 8-9. And the Falcons have the best record in division, so that will win the division for the Atlanta Falcons, which is just, if they win against the Saints and the Bucs lose, the Falcons can somehow get in the division. It's just mental. Getting in the playoffs via the division title and the 4 seed, which is just absolutely mental. And now we're playing the Eagles, which, again, the Eagles are beatable, so that is, again, a very interesting story going into the wildcard race. Can the NFC South win a playoff game? They've not won a playoff game since obviously Brady and the Bucs won a Super Bowl. Very, very fascinating story for them. I don't really know what else to say, if I'm being honest. Obviously we'll go back to the Bears before we carry on with the Falcons. As for the Bears, obviously they've got a difficult decision on their hands now regarding Justin Fields. Personally, I keep Fields. I get an offensive head coach in, and I trade the pick, or go for someone like Marvin Harrison Jr. or an offensive lineman, obviously at number 1 overall. It's obviously good from the Panthers pick. Obviously, a receiver going number 1 overall will be awesome, especially with how how much a superstar receiver matters, and obviously offensive linemen have gone number one overall, plenty of times. So I think that's a possibility. That's the thing. I mean, again, with how Fields is playing, unless you get a really, really good package for him, I can't see him. I can't see them wanting to get rid of him because, like, again, this second half of the year, in my opinion, he's been a top 10 quarterback, maybe even top 5. He's been awesome. It's just the first half of the year was absolutely horrific. So that's sort of let him down. But yeah, he's been awesome in the second half of the year. And then we'll finish with the Falcons. Obviously, even if they do win the division, I'd probably just still tear down this regime. I'd certainly fire Arthur Smith, perhaps go further because a lot of the draft picks haven't really worked out either. But part of me thinks he'll get another year with a better QB, maybe Justin Fields, you never know. And then there's an interesting scenario with who starts for QB next week against a must-win game against the Saints. It may be Taylor Heineke, but he left this game with an ankle injury. Desmond Ridder came back in to the starting job in the fourth quarter, obviously in relief of Heineke, who was injured. We'll update you of everything on Friday because we still don't know who's going to start in this one. Obviously, Taylor Heineke said in his press conference this week that he'll do everything he can to play, but obviously we'll see how much he practices and everything in the week. So Friday we'll know. We'll at least have a better idea of who plays. I'd probably guess it'd be Heineke though as well, because if they're putting him out in front of the media, he's got to be healthy enough that he has a chance of playing. So I think he will play. And then that sets us up nicely for the other division that is just so close, and any one of 3 teams can win it. It's the AFC South. And we'll start with the Colts. The Colts remain the 7th seed with a win over the informed Las Vegas Raiders. It was a pretty close game throughout, even though the Colts led from start to finish. The box score and the scoreline was very close. And every statistical measure is very close. The only difference being the fact that the Colts had one more field goal that Matt Gay scored. The Raiders basically stayed in touch, and the game came down to an onside kick recovery after Aiden O'Connell hit Devontae Adams for a touchdown with 48 seconds left to go. But obviously the Colts recovered that onside kick and they won the game. Gardner Minshew looked good as well, which was good for them, bouncing back from a disappointing offensive performance against the Falcons. And obviously that good offensive performance came against a defense that has led the league in points per game allowed since Antonio Pierce took over as interim head coach. So that was a great day at the office for the Colts on Sunday. They now face the Texans on Saturday night as they're already in. As they're already in. Sorry, they now control their own destiny of the playoffs. They're the 7th seed. If they win, they win. They're a playoff team. If the Jags then go and lose on Sunday, they win the division. If they lose this one, they're out of the playoffs. And that's what makes this one so fascinating, because the winner of that game, Texans Colts on Saturday night, could win the AFC South. Obviously they will do if the Jags lose to Tennessee, but the winner of that one will probably most likely make the playoffs. So it's basically a winning game. And again, fun battle of this for the AFC South title. 3 teams at 9-7. The second being the Houston Texans, as I said, who are still in the hunt ahead of an all AFC South showdown against the Colts next Saturday. As I said, CJ Stroud was back in this one. He was victorious in the battle of rookie AFC South QBs as well. A battle that I think we'll see for years to come between him and Will Levis. But unfortunately, that battle ended early after Levis suffered a foot injury on a strip sack from Jerry Hughes that Sheldon Rankins recovered for a touchdown. The game was 17-0 at that point and kind of soured afterwards, with the Texans just remaining in control from start to finish. And as with Levis, it's not been confirmed, how serious it is, but I can see them resting him next week, even if it's not serious. It's not worth putting him out there unless he is 100%, which I doubt he is with that foot injury, because it did look quite bad. But then again, the Titans have been such a mess this year. I really don't know. I really don't know what they're gonna do. This Mike Vrabel firing stuff just won't go away. And that's a really interesting scenario to watch over the next week or so. Is Mike Vrabel going to get fired? Obviously, the Titans have been disappointing in the last 2 years, but they've had a load of injuries, and then this year they've not been very talented. So I wouldn't fire him, but maybe he does get fired. If so, I think the Patriots just snap him up like that and go hire him. Even though I think they should go for an offensive coach. If there's a chance that they can go and get Mike Vrabel, I think the Patriots will go and get Mike Vrabel, certainly. And then, as for the Texans, obviously, win against the Colts, they're in the playoffs. They could even win the AFC South. But they may go into that game without Laramie Tunsil and Noah Brown. Hopefully their injuries aren't too serious. They both did leave the game and didn't return, obviously against the Titans. Two key components down the stretch for them as well. Obviously, Tunsil's one of the best offensive tackles in football. He is the highest paid offensive tackle as well. Noah Brown has made some plays whilst Nicky Collins and Tank Dell have been injured as well. So obviously if both of them guys can't go, that'd be a very tough ask for them to beat the Colts, especially Tunsil, on Saturday. And then the Titans now go on to play the Jaguars, who shut out the Panthers in a must-win game. And they remain the AFC South leaders ahead of Week 18, just ending the four-game losing streak. They got the job done. They had to win this game. If they lost this game, they would be in a really, really difficult situation going and probably would not make the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence was not good to go in this one. CJ Beathard started in it. And they didn't need Lawrence in this one anyway because the Panthers just could not get it going against a Jaguars defense that really stepped up in this one. The Jags defense, I was very high on them at the start of the year. They started the year very well, but they've regressed since their bye week. They've sort of struggled on defense, I'd say, and then the offense hasn't been great either. So they've lost four in a row heading into this one, and injuries have really been a factor as well. But the Jags defense got to Bryce Young 6 times. They picked him off once as well, and they put the Panthers back to earth, obviously, because they've had 5 or 6 quarters before this one of good offense. It's got 30 points against the Packers. Bryce Young led them on a game-winning drive before that as well, against the Falcons. So it set up a scenario where, the Jags back a quarterback, the Panthers, Bryce Young looked like one of the best quarterbacks in football the last 2 weeks heading into this game as well. So maybe the Panthers can ruin the Jags season. Unfortunately, the Jags defense was great. And I mean, look, they weren't great on offense. They had loads of field goals, but 2 Travis Etienne touchdowns to seal the job. An awesome 62-yard touchdown for him, running down the right sideline as well. They can still win the AFC South. Obviously, they're the leaders now. They play the Titans next week. The Titans. It would be funny if the Titans won the division for the Texans or the Colts. But either way, the Titans can really spice up the AFC South. Certainly. By beating the Jags. I don't think the Jags get in as a wildcard team, if I'm being honest. I've not really looked at the probabilities, but and also if there's no Trevor Lawrence either, I don't really want them in either, because I don't really want to watch CJ Beathard and a very injured Jags offense in the playoffs, if I'm being honest. So I'm kind of rooting for a Jags loss, and then obviously the winner of the Houston and Indianapolis game gets in the playoffs. But look, any of those 3 teams can still win the division, and it's why it's so fascinating. But as a neutral, I want to see the best playoff games possible, and I don't think a CJ Beathard Jaguars team, should Trevor Lawrence not be able to go next week or in the playoffs, is very, very appetising. But it's just so fascinating, that division race, and I can't wait to watch both games, especially obviously Houston, Indianapolis on Saturday night. That'd be a really fun game to watch. If I was to guess who wins that division right now, I'll go for the Colts, which with the backup QB, of course. Gardner Minshew is a very interesting story. They probably would have got it done with Anthony Richardson, who would look awesome before his injury, of course. But look, Minshew, I don't think he's a starter, but he's certainly a very, very high-end backup in this league, and he's shown that with a good offensive line, with decent skill position players and a good defense, he can win games and certainly get the Colts into the postseason and build up the roster and build up the confidence ahead of, hopefully many, many years of Anthony Richardson and QB in the future. Right, we'll wrap up with 2 games that weren't great to finish off the podcast. And we won't talk about Saturday's game against the Cowboys game because it's too far. It's Tuesday, it's too long ago now. But the fact that the Cowboys won that game is just... it's if you're a Lions fan, I bet you're really upset now, because you probably had a really good chance to get the 2 seed, unfortunately. But it is what it is. Anyway, the NFC 1 seed was wrapped up with the Niners getting back to winning ways, obviously clinching the 1 seed with a win over the Commanders, 27-10, and an Eagles loss. It was actually quite close, but it wasn't a great game of football to watch. But a Sam Howell interception to Charvarius Ward, went in the red zone to pull up within 3, sort of gave the game to the Niners, and they scored again at the end of the game to make it a 17 point game. Brock Purdy hit Brandon Ayuk twice on the next drive, a dime down the left sideline, and obviously a cool play on a scramble drill. He's quite good at. One thing I will give to Brock Purdy is he's quite good at creating plays after someone breaks down. Obviously, when you have an offensive line as good as the Niners, you can do that. But yeah, he if anything, he probably holds on to football too long. But when he does hold on to it for a longer time, he can create. He can create plays. Yeah, like a top franchise quarterback would do. I just don't think he can come up for them in a big moments. But fair play. That TD to Ayuk was a cool play, and it was a 14-point swing that gave the Niners the win on this game. You may be asking why Sam Howell started instead of Jacoby Brissett, who was declared starter early last week. We mentioned on the podcast on Friday he's a starter after coming in the previous two games. Well, Brissett actually suffered a hamstring injury in Friday's practice, literally right as we were recording the podcast, and he was later ruled out for Sunday's game as well. So that puts together an interesting scenario for next week. So I actually thought the Commanders' offense looked quite good of Howell again, certainly better than they looked the last two games before that, and again against the Niners' offense. Had not thrown that interception, could have been a different story. Maybe the Commanders could have maybe not won the game, but it would have been certainly within one score, and maybe they probably would have covered the spread as well. The spread was 12.5 points. But no, as I said, the Niners weren't at the very best, but they got the job done, and they now probably rest their players ahead of their much earned second bye week, and obviously for number one seed in the playoffs. I think they might be slightly concerned that Dallas looked to be winning the NFC East, because obviously I think for them they were hoping, especially with how Philly looked, they'd probably be the 2 seed. It looks like Dallas may be the 2 seed now, so it looks like we're probably going to get a San Francisco Dallas as a championship game, which for the history makers and basically for the schedule makers, that's perfect, because and for the ratings it's perfect as well, and obviously for the history books, with so many Niners Cowboys NFC championship games or key playoff games, that game will be the most viewed game maybe in NFL history, if I was to guess, because that goes to huge fan bases. And NFC, a lot of NFC teams have bigger fan bases than AFC because they're older teams as well. And that for me, I think they're still clear favourites for the NFC Championship title, but they will be concerned that the Cowboys are looking to be the 2 seed. As Washington, well, they're firing from Rivera, aren't they? You have to lose. You have to if you lose 7 in a row, surely, right? It could be 8 in a row if they lose next week as well to close out the season. It's what they should do, though. They should lose. I've been saying for years that the Washington Commanders have just been so Redskins, what they were called before, and the football team before that. They've just been so average. They've been so mid that they've needed something to change their franchise. They've needed to either be really good or really bad to change the shape of their franchise. And they've needed a high pick for years. They're going to get that high draft pick. Obviously, last time they got it, they went for Chase Young, which was a really, really bad pick. Obviously, he now plays for the Niners, who he was okay, and they got some compensation back. But had they gone for a quarterback, had they gone for a Justin Herbert, then the franchise could be in a completely different spot. They're currently at the number 2 pick again. So I expect them to go quarterback in this draft, unlike pass rusher. There's not really a standout pass rusher in this draft anyway, like Nick Bosa, Chase Young, prospects heading into it anyway. I hope Eric Bieniemy gets named head coach, and I really just hope that Washington, because I think they've got loads of cap room as well. I think they've got a roster that you can. I think they can get playoffs next year if you do it right. Obviously, I think they've got a new GM as well, probably. If you can get it right, I think they're a playoff team next year, because they've got so many, almost their pieces, that if you can just adjust the offensive line, if you can just QB, I think they can make the playoffs. If you can do their defense, if you can mess up their defense as well, if you can fix the defense as well, they messed up the defense, then they're on to a winner. But they're one of those teams that are just on the cusp of being good, but because they've not had the QB, because their offensive line has been terrible as well, they've really, really struggled this year. So, that's a really interesting scenario. And then we'll finish off with the battle of AFC West backup QBs that Jarrett Stidham and the Broncos won. The Broncos winning 16-9. It just wasn't a great game at all, which is why it ends the podcast. But actually, I thought there wasn't much difference between the Russell Wilson offense and the Jarrett Stidham offense, which might be telling. An awesome TD from Lil Jordan Humphrey was the only 6 of the day. It was on 3rd and 8 at the Denver 40. He caught the ball near the Chargers 40 and broke a ton of tackles on his way to the end zone. A 54-yard touchdown. It was an awesome play from him. Obviously, he was with Sean Payton in New Orleans as well, so obviously he knows his game. And it's why he sort of had a more increased role as receivers got injured and as the years gone on. One talking point you probably could take out of this game could be the Chargers having a bad fake punt. Should they have gone for it on 4th and 1 and got it, they might have scored. Instead, obviously they turned the ball over, they turned a field goal that made it a 2-score game, and after then the Broncos were in control throughout. With this win, Denver swept the Chargers as well, so they swept the Chargers as well, getting 2 wins over them, but it has hurt their draft pick. Losing this game for the Chargers, moving up to the number 6 pick, and if they lose again next week, obviously they're a very bad team now, they could be as high as number 2 pick. As for the Broncos, they're now number 14 in the draft order, so unfortunately for them, this win has hurt them. But yeah, I just don't get it. I don't get moving up from Russell Wilson, but maybe it's just the offense didn't look too dissimilar with a week of Jarrett Stidham taking snaps. So maybe Peyton's right. I don't know, but yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing with this podcast, isn't it? Really, especially this week 17 recap. There are so many questions that I want answering, and we're gonna get all those questions answered really, really soon. Whether it's week 18 next week or whether it's the off season, which we're really, really close to now. The next few months in the NFL, it's going to be so fun because so much is going to happen, so much change, so much turnover in the off season. We're going to have, there are division races between 3 teams going into week 18 as well, which is just absolutely mental. You've got a Sunday night game between a team that could get a 2 seed or with a win, and a team that also could get a 2 seed with a win, but also if they lose, could miss out on the playoffs entirely. It's just absolutely fascinating, and I just can't wait for it. This has been a 10Yards NFL podcast. I've been Sam Moore, your host, and I will see you for that Week 18 preview on Friday, our last preview of the regular season of the year. I can't wait for it. Just bring on Week 18. It's going to be so fun. As I said, I've been Sam Moore. It's been a 10Yards NFL podcast, and I will see you next time.